This BBC podcast is supported by ads outside the UK.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
You're about to listen to a brand new episode of Curious Cases. Shows are going to be released weekly, wherever you get your podcasts. But if you're in the UK, you can listen to the latest episodes first on BBC Sounds. I'm Hannah Fry.
And I'm Dara O'Brien.
And this is Curious Cases.
The show where we take your quirkiest questions,
your crunchiest conundrums,
and then we solve them.
With the power of science.
I mean, do we always solve them?
I mean, the hit rate's pretty low.
But it is with science.
It is with science. Welcome to this week's episode of Curious Cases. Dara, I think our topic is going to resonate with you this week.
Why will it resonate with me? It's
about resonance.
Yeah, that's not how a pun works. You can't just say the thing.
Yeah, but it's got double meaning.
It's not. It has no double meaning. You have to move it one step away from the thing, not just say the thing.
Go on. Give me a better one.
God.
You got one?
Have I got one?
Yeah.
No. I don't.
Okay, fine. This is an episode that is going to ring true.
There we go. That's there we go. That's much better.
Because we have had a question in from Belinda in Melbourne. Have a listen to this.
My question is about resonance. I'd really like to understand how a bridge such as the one over Tacoma Narrows, Washington, USA, in 1940 could get tangled up and collapse because its resonant frequency was too close to some outside vibration, such as a strong wind. Does everything have a resonant frequency? If so, what would the resonant frequency of a human be?
That was Belinda in Melbourne there.
How beautifully did she do that?
That was stunning.
Absolutely delightful. I mean, can Belinda read everyone's questions out in future? Nothing against everyone else, but she took such care over it as well.
She really did.
Oh, well, wow. We absolutely know what the question is. It's about resonance. Resonance, I've never been sure. When does it resonance and when is it vibration?
Well, I think that's some of the stuff that we need to find out.
We really do. So we're joined by Vonda Lewis, Professor of Structural Engineering at Warwick University, and the physicist and oceanographer Helen Chersky of UCL, and also the co-host of Radio 4's environmental show Rare Earth.
Okay, Helen, let's start with you. I mean, the basic question first. What is resonance?
Well, we live in a world that wobbles. Things oscillate quite a lot. And so there's two stages to understanding resonance. And the first thing is to understand a little bit about the wobbling. So I'm going to pick an everyday example, a cup of tea. Get yourself a cup of tea. And if you give the cup a little nudge, you will see that the tea or whatever it is that's in it will slosh from side to side. And it's got a certain rate that it sloshes at. It doesn't really matter how you push it. It sloshes at exactly the same rate. And that's to do with the physics of the cup and the liquid. So the first thing is that everything in the world around us pretty much has this frequency that we call a natural frequency. That's the rate at which it will vibrate or wobble if you just give it a bit of push. So that's the first thing. But almost always for every oscillation, there's two forces pushing on something. And in the case of the cup, there's kinetic energy that is pushing liquid to the side of the cup once you've started it. And then the other thing is that there's gravitational potential energy. So gravity is pulling it down, but the kinetic energy is moving everything to the side. And energy switches between those two. And the natural frequency depends on how long it takes that balance to switch around. And so energy will go from one type of energy to another type of energy. And at the same time, to make that happen physically, it's going from being sloped in the cup to being flat and moving to being sloped up the other side.
So I think that sort of makes sense in a cup where you've obviously got the constraints of the, the ceramic on the side. But I mean, you said everything wobbles. I mean, does everything have a resonant frequency then, even things that are not solid?
So a resonant frequency is something different. Everything has a natural frequency, unless it's a really squishy, spongy blob of jelly. And even that probably has a really faint one. Pretty much everything. So your internal organs will wobble at a certain frequency if you nudge them. The bubbles that I study, if you pour out water and you hear bubbles going ping, 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 they're oscillating at their natural frequency. So almost everything around us does have this natural frequency. So if you push it, it will vibrate. But then the resonance thing is one step further. So I'm always in a hurry. When I'm walking down the corridor with my cup of tea, I'm stepping at a certain pace, right? So I'm kind of step, 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 step. And if it happens that my stepping pace exactly matches the natural sloshing of my tea, the sloshes get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and I spill my tea. And there's this really inconvenient thing in the world, which is that the rate we happen to walk happens to more or less match the natural frequency of your average mug of tea, which means that if you're in a hurry, we all spill our tea all the time.
I'm sorry, I just need to clarify. I can see the cup of tea, I can see the splashing that's going on, but if you agitate it more, are you saying that those ripples won't go faster, but they'll just get bigger?
That's right. So it's only when the matching comes. So you've got to push it at exactly the rate that it wants to swing anyway. And then even a little push will make it much, much bigger than you would expect. So if you were walking along if you're one of those people that drinks coffee in tiny, tiny cups, you're not going to spill that because the natural frequency is really, really fast because it's really small. It's only when the push that you're getting from your walking is going at exactly the same speed, then a little push gets amplified. Basically, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what a resonance is. An external oscillating force. So something that's going push, 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 push. And if that matches up with the natural frequency of the thing, that's when you get a resonance.
Do we ever use this to our advantage then? So have a known natural frequency of something and then match it externally?
Yeah, we do it all the time, actually. And of course, we are all in a radio studio. And at the start of radio shows, people quite often say, tune in. And actually what tuning in means is, please resonate with me. Although I'm not sure most radio engineers think of it like that. But you can have lots of different types of resonance. So you can also have an electronic resonance where electrons are oscillating backwards and forwards. And of course, we're surrounded by radio waves all the time. There's waves coming and going all the time around us. So how does a radio engineer pick out the one frequency or a listener pick out the one frequency that they want? Well, they have a little circuit, and that circuit has its natural frequency, and you can alter things in the circuit to choose its natural frequency, and then it will only respond to the waves going past that are of that frequency. So tuning into a radio is quite literally altering your electric circuit so it resonates with the radio station that you want to hit. So, there's lots of resonance going on right now.
Because the frequencies have to match in order for it to sort of give energy to the amplitude.
That's right, yes.
I mean, the example people always use is like pushing a child on a swing, right? That if you manage to get the timing right, you can get the child to go really high. And if you get it wrong, well, the swing stops going so high and you push the child off.
Or they fall off.
Or they fall off, yes, exactly. I mean, that's, I guess, what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, that's right. And resonance is actually very useful. I was thinking about it today. I was trying to lift a heavy thing up. It was a sort of heavy bag. There wasn't anything valuable in it. And I gave it a bit of a swing. And you swing your arm back and you swing your arm up. And you know that if you put in relatively little effort from yourself, because you're swinging at the natural frequency of your arm as a pendulum, you can swing that up onto the top of a wardrobe or wherever it's meant to go. So we're using resonance to help us because it's a much more efficient way to get things done.
Do you find this in the natural world? I mean, are there animals who've sort of worked out how to use resonance to their advantage?
There are, and I mean, I don't think they're thinking about all the physics, but they definitely make it work. So there are nocturnal spiders that hunt using a web to catch insects. And of course, what a spider wants a web for is that it's going to sit in the middle of the web and the web is going to catch things and then the spider can go and get them. So the problem for the spider is how to know when to go and fetch something. And so what these spiders do is they effectively decide on the tension and the thickness of those threads so that they will resonate if an insect is struggling. So if an insect gets stuck in the web, it will pretty much be struggling within a known series of frequencies, right? So it's a relatively narrow window. So the spiders actually make sure that their spider web threads are resonant with that frequency, because then what happens is the insect struggles, the oscillation gets passed very easily down the web to the middle of the spider, and the spider goes, oh, time to go and get lunch.
Does that mean then, if you go up to a spider's web, is there a particular frequency you can wobble it at that will...
I heard this fact when I was a kid.
Did you?
And I've spent my entire life trying to do that.
What, trying to wobble it?
Trying to wobble a spider's web in order to lure the spider.
With what are you using?
My finger, obviously. I'm not like, I train a fly.
Does it work?
No, I put my big sausage finger in and just on the edge of the web and I'm just wobbling a little bit.
Does it work?
It's never worked.
Never worked.
Literally
Never
in
worked.
45 years of trying that it's never ever worked like that. I don't know what I would do if it did. Like I would absolutely, especially as a kid, I would have ran screaming if I go and suddenly a spider comes, yum, 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 spider comes jumping out like the I would have run screaming for it. But I have my entire life been trying to lure a spider from the web.
I strongly suspect the spider would be more scared of your sausage finger than you would be.
Possibly, yeah. It's going, I'm not going to have the silk for this.
Okay, all of these examples, though, so far have been where you just chance upon resonance, or maybe you're using it to your advantage. But, I mean, it's not always a useful thing, is it?
No. So there's an example of an earthquake that took place in Mexico City in 1985. It was a big earthquake, lots of people died. And so some engineers went along afterwards and kind of said, what can we learn from all of this? And there were two things that they observed. Firstly, that the layers of sediment underneath Mexico City had done something very weird. So normally earthquake wobbling is really complicated. It's lots of different waves at lots of different frequencies all overlapping with each other. But in this case, the sediment meant that the whole city was basically oscillating at exactly one frequency, which is very unusual in an earthquake. Then they noticed that all the buildings lower than 5 stories high were basically fine. But actually, the buildings higher than 20 stories, they were basically fine too. It was the ones between 5 and 20 stories high that fell down. And it turned out that the frequency of the earthquake exactly matched pretty much the natural frequency of a building in that middle range. And so that's why there was a huge amount of destruction. But then they looked at the buildings, they looked at the likely earthquake frequencies, and they redesigned the buildings so that they wouldn't have that natural frequency. And actually, I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, there was another big earthquake, far, far less destruction. And one of the reasons was that the buildings were not resonant with the earthquake. So it does cause problems, but actually knowing about it gives you ways to engineer around it.
I think this is a good time to bring in Wanda Lewis, Professor of Structural Engineering at Warwick University. Hello, Wanda, how are you?
Hello.
Because it interests us a lot how big, rigid structures respond to these kind of huge forces.
Well, I love the explanation of resonance with the cup of tea. I would just like to add that every object has got natural frequency and more than one. Some have got infinite number of natural frequencies. And designers are capable of finding out about them.
Okay, so in theory, how would resonance make a bridge fall?
Well, the bigger the object, the more difficult it is to excite it. But people exact fluctuating load on a bridge.
Yeah.
It's the vibrations. If the frequency of that matches the frequency, natural frequency of the bridge, it can start growing and eventually will set up stresses. And if the stresses exceed the strength of the material, then the structure breaks.
So it looks like a very rigid thing, a bridge. If energy is being added to it at a particular frequency, which may be, unfortunately, the frequency at which people walk,
yes,
that energy can then be being stored in the bridge, and the bridge can end up undulating to a point where
that's
it
right.
would
Yeah,
break.
it's the interaction between the fluctuating load and the structure.
Well, there are many examples that people cite about resonance as a kind of destructive force. And probably the most famous is the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, which fell in 1940. And the footage is very, very famous of that. Is as an example of resonance.
With the Tacoma Bridge, it was the shape of the deck. The side panels of the deck were just flat plates. So the exposure to the wind was quite big. So the pressure applied by the wind was quite big, but it was the shape of the flat plate. As the wind went over the plate, the flow was interrupted so that local turbulence occurred, and then you were actually changing the nature of the fluctuating wind, and it was those vortices that caused the failure of the bridge.
Okay, so it's not really, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge is often mentioned as an example of resonance, but it's not really in the same way.
In fact, aerostaticians would argue that Tacoma Bridge was not a case of resonance, but aerodynamic flutter, they call it flutter, because you've interfered with the fluctuating load.
I do feel that in a situation where the wind blows down a bridge, flutter isn't really doing it for me as a term. It seems like a very light and frothy term for wind that blew down the bridge. It's sweet, isn't it?
Little bird just fluttering by.
Yeah.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, history's toughest heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
Yeah.
A famous example closer to home would be the Millennium Bridge, which opened in 2000, connecting St. Paul's to the Tate, and then almost immediately began to wobble in a way that people found incredibly scary and was shut down after 3 days. I mean, again, is this a situation where resonance is a destructive force?
Well, the problem was the deck is very, very light, made out of aluminium. So it's not too difficult to excite a light structure like that. And as you pointed out, as people walked on the bridge, we don't walk like models on a catwalk, putting one foot in front of the other. We go sideways, and there will always be a tiny lateral force, which combined with a number of people, not everybody, of course, walked in step, but there will be a few people that did. And that was enough to cause this synchronized movement.
This is not resonance then, is it?
Well, it was difficult to actually decide looking at the film. So the strict definition of resonance is when the amplitude of displacements grows. But I think it was getting greater and greater before they shut the bridge. So, yeah, the designers decided to shut the structure.
Well, I also quite like the implication that people were just walking wrong. I like that
Bring your catwalk walks
honestly,
today, people.
You sashay down here, you turn on point, and then you're back again. And that's it. That's how you properly walk.
So have you ever seen the video of soon after the Millennium Bridge opened? It is crazy. It's crazy. And this bridge was tested. It was up for, months and months in advance. Winter winds, no problem. But soon as they put people on it, these two effects happened, right? Which is that they matched the resonant frequency of the bridge. But as soon as the bridge started swinging backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, it knocked people onto the same pattern of left, right. Because you're now effectively on a moving platform.
Yes.
So the more people that got knocked onto that same frequency, the more the bridge went, and so on and so on and so on. I mean, it is like you would not want to be walking across that bridge. They closed after a couple of days, right?
That's right.
Von, you spent your life working in the structural engineering of bridges. How do you test for this? For wind, for footsteps, for what's the process?
At Warwick, we do have testing laboratories, and you do test elements of the structure. When you're checking a structure, you can put it into a wind tunnel, small-scale model, and then make a prediction of what the real structure would behave like.
Is it a case that in any of these structures, which we regard as quite rigid, and we like to think of these things as strong and solid, there have to be points where they're soft and they'll absorb forces?
Yes.
Is there that mixture you have to have?
Yes, I think so.
Helen, your thoughts on all of this stuff?
These things are really complicated. And often when these disasters happen, it's because nature was doing things that are slightly more complex than had been anticipated.
But, I mean, we keep talking as if it's a fundamental, the resonant frequency. When you build a bridge, is there a certificate somewhere that says the weight of the bridge is this, the length of the bridge is this, and its resonant frequency is this many hertz?
Yes, you know that.
You should know that.
Yeah.
Okay,
all right. So what I'm getting from this is that, yes, bridges can fall down, but really we're quite good at checking, so probably don't worry about it too much. Okay, aside from physical structures, there is another part of the question from our listener, which is about whether we as humans have a resonant frequency. And it turns out Southampton University has got a whole department that is dedicated to studying what happens to the body when it's vibrated. Phil Moxley is Senior Research Assistant in the Human Factors Unit of the Sound and Vibration Department there. Have a listen to this.
The Human Factors Research Unit is really interested in one question: how do people respond to being vibrated? What we do on a day-to-day basis is conduct experiments that look at specific kinds of vibration applied by, boats and trains and, anything that moves and is likely to cause you to move in response, and see how the human responds to that from a health perspective, from a performance perspective, and from the perspective of whether we can expect them to have some kind of injury as a result of it. So whilst the human body does have a resonant frequency, and in fact a series of resonant frequencies, it's not like a bridge or some other big structure where you find this one key frequency and you excite it at it and it suddenly falls apart, right? It's a much more complicated system. If you think of the human body and like all the bits you've got inside you swirling around, you can kind of think of each one of those as an individual mass connected to everything else in the body by a series of springs and solid interfaces. And when you try and excite a system like that, it's very rare that you can find one magic frequency that it suddenly shakes itself to pieces, which for the human body is probably a very good thing. What we have for the human body is kind of a broad range where we know that when you excite the human body, those systems tend to move a little bit more. And there's a broad range of about 5 hertz to about 8 hertz for a person sat in a car seat, being like the classic example of where you might experience this. Over a long enough time, if you are exposed to this on a daily basis, like for example a bus driver, a taxi driver, a farmer out on a tractor every day of the week, that can start to cause problems, and in particular lower back problems and joint problems in general.
Helen, what do you make of this? Would we be surprised if we had a natural frequency?
I think it's quite nice that humans are complex things and have more than one. It does make me think of those massive, great big speakers, though, you know, in massive sound systems that are almost certainly making at least some sounds at frequencies that are too low for us to hear, because our hearing cuts off at about 20 hertz, but we feel them, right? We know we can hear music through the floor. So I guess it's just a different way of hearing. But as humans, we are so squishy that mostly we are just damping out all the oscillations. But the problem is, you know, I guess all that energy is still going into our system somewhere, and some internal soft tissues are taking the strain, and that's not really what they've been evolved for. So we've not ever had to deal with the consequences of that.
Can still be quite a nice experience, though. You know, go to a particular concert, it's like, wow, that song really, really resonated with my liver. I think it's time, though, for us to introduce our mystery musical guest for this episode. Senna Bakari is a sound therapy practitioner. And Senna, you've brought an array of instruments which are particularly relevant for talking about the resonance of bodies.
Hello. Yes, so I have brought a few different bits from my quite vast collection of sound healing instruments. So
did you say sound healing?
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. So sound healing, it's a wellness practice where we use sustained tones and frequencies to induce resonance with different areas of the body to enhance physical health and emotional health, primarily through eliciting the relaxation response.
So you are deliberately trying to make different parts of the body resonate?
Yes.
Okay, show us your instrument.
Okay, so these tuning forks are really nice because they offer a very subtle sound, because you'll find people have different preferences. These are nice and gentle. These can be selected by their frequency. So, for example, I've got the C notes at 256 hertz. If I were to pair that with the G at 384 hertz, we get what's called the musical interval of the fifth. So we just use something to activate the forks with. I'm using a hockey puck here. So activate the 2 notes. And we would gently bring this in at the ears of a client.
Oh, that does actually feel quite pleasant.
Well, it's a pleasant noise. It's a lovely sound. It's a nice chord. It's like one of the great chords.
And then if I may, we would then move into a different interval.
So I think that's doing something to me.
Okay. Great. That maybe you may have discovered your natural frequency.
I think that's it. I think that's maybe what I'm saying. It's like it sort of feels like the ringing continues in your head.
See, here's my thing. They're lovely sounds.
Try it.
I'll try it. Okay, grand. I'll try it. Okay, fine. I just feel like we're such complex kind of mixes of mushy and hard that I think there wouldn't be one. We'd have a number of different things that we'd like in different places in different parts of the body, or would resonate.
I think it sort of feels different to just listening to a normal sound.
I almost compare it to a brain massage, because what they actually do, you're introducing a different frequency at each ear.
Yeah.
So you begin to feel this sense of harmony.
There might also be a Pavlov's dog here thing, though, which is that when you go to a spa, there's often
you're sort of in the zone for this anyway. It's great. They're lovely sounds, whatever. But I guess that if you're in a meditative state and this is a very calming sound, that would be calming for you, and that would be a pleasant thing to do.
So here we are, Dara.
It's a lovely experience. It's very, very nice.
Dara's reaction didn't really work for radio, but he shrugged his shoulders and kept a completely blank expression.
It's a lovely sound. I see why it would be a very calming experience. I just don't necessarily think. I think we're such massively complicated things. It'd be very difficult to make a prediction from outside of what's going to actually create an effect within the body, like a measure.
Oh yeah, we also presumably have different natural frequencies for different people because this is something that's dependent on size, dependent on structure, etc.
I think, yeah, I mean, because look, physically, me in comparison to you, Hannah, I'd like a bigger tuning fork. I mean, how big can these tuning forks get? They, very, very.
A massive gong in the corner.
Yeah. It's got. I mean, you have gongs. You have gongs.
Come on, bring out the gong.
I have got massive gongs at home, but I was only able to carry in a baby one.
Okay, fine.
But I mean, there are a couple of studies that demonstrate that this kind of therapy can change people's moods or improve people's moods.
The literature around this is definitely expanding and becoming more into the mainstream realm.
So if you believe it's going to help you, doctors say 30% of healing is due to placebo. If you believe it's going to help you, it's going to help you.
I'm sorry, you're holding a gong in front of us. I'm sorry, we all waiting to hear the gong?
I want to hear the gong.
Yeah, so a little bit awkward to place it down, but I'll try my best. This is probably more for you, I think.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, deep and nice. Okay. It was lovely. I mean, it's lovely. I don't know if those stuff was happening. Who knows?
I know, you're right.
But it's
there's
still a very
sort
pleasant thing to hear.
Kind of ancient therapy about this, you know?
There is a reason that gongs are like a huge part of certain cultures that signals the opening or the closing of prayer or whatever.
Dinner.
Or dinner. Yeah, I suppose it's that. Wow, really? Did you have? We were just shouted at.
Ancient China.
And your gap.
Hey, I'm at Cambridge now, so you got to get used to the gong.
No, I'm more used to it like an Irish mammy going, dinner, now. Jeez, it's not getting any warmer. That was our gong.
There's not a resonant frequency for that one.
Okay. But it had an effect, tell you. Deep down.
There's
one over here as well that I'm desperate to see.
Yeah, so this one is an alchemy crystal bowl. So it is made like 99.9% pure quartz. So more of an ethereal, lighter sort of sound, I think, than the gong.
Oh, it's still going.
I mean, it's a cool sound wave.
Isn't
That's
it?
That's really, really amazing.
That's the quartz, presumably, which has this, vibrational property.
Just for people who can't see this, you're no longer doing this. You stopped doing that about a minute and a half ago, and it's still...
We're still going.
Yeah.
And this one really drops people into that meditative state very quickly.
I just want to do an Amazing. Do you feel calmer?
No, I'm at work. And so, I'm kind of very much focused. Not the place to really get into the zone on it, like whatever. But as a general thing, I can see why it's a lovely experience.
Very much.
That in itself is a thing that makes people feel better.
Hard agree.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much to our guests in the studio, Helen Chersky, Vonda Lewis, Philip Moxley and Senna Bakari.
How are your vibes after that? I mean, are you like in a zone?
Is that what vibes means?
Yeah, vibes is short for vibrations.
No, it's not.
It literally is. Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys. Vibes is vibrations. Did you not know that? Because I didn't know that either for a long time. So the whole notion of there being kind of a human vibration, that's been around for a long time. People have been talking that for a long time.
What, since the 1960s?
Since 1960s at least, yeah. And they probably maybe even predates that.
I reckon if you ask anyone in ancient China, I think they would say they cared quite a lot about ancient vibrations.
I think they'd advance you with a gong. That would have settled the issue there and then.
Oh, do you know what? We should have borrowed a gong so we can use it for the end of the show. Nothing announces that something is finished quite like a gong.
That's ironic because the gong itself never seems to end. I mean, there's no better metaphor for the show. Once it starts, it just goes on and on and on. If you want to be notified as soon as a new episode is released, make sure you're subscribed to Curious Cases on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on.
Attention, animal lovers, haters and undecideds. A little birdie, a tit, told me that you're looking for a podcast just like Evil Genius, but without all those stupid humans. I'm Russell Kane, waddling onto your feed and squawking about my show, Evil Animals. Every episode, I'm joined by two human guests, or as I like to call them, ex-monkeys, passing judgment on all the creepiest crawlies and the biggest elephants in the room. Our vampire bats, terrifying giant mosquitoes. Our bottlenose dolphins, sex-obsessed savages. And we're going there. Domestic cats, evil or genius. Pig out on Evil Animals in the Evil Genius podcast feed, first on BBC Sounds.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
This BBC podcast is supported by ads outside the UK.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
You're about to listen to a brand new episode of Curious Cases. Shows are going to be released weekly, wherever you get your podcasts. But if you're in the UK, you can listen to the latest episodes first on BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
I'm Hannah Fry.
And I'm Dara O'Brien.
And this is Curious Cases.
The show where we take your quirkiest questions,
your crunchiest conundrums,
and then we solve them.
With the power of science.
I mean, do we always solve them?
I mean, the hit rate's pretty low.
But it is with science.
It is with science. Dara, welcome.
Hannah, it's a delight to be here.
Your first Curious Case.
I know, my first ever episode.
I'm very pleased to have you.
I'm so excited, though. Do you know what I was really excited about when it came to being part of this show?
Tell me.
Oh, just the hard science. The big shiny science. You know, the science that has to be bolted together and it takes ages to do, and the numbers are amazing. Oh, this science took 40 million light bulbs and 6 million, cable ties. You know, 67 countries are involved in an initiative that will build the world's largest... And then it probably had to be, put under a lake or, burrowed into a mountain, that kind of stuff. This can only happen by simply lifting the entire thing into space and big, huge, hard, shiny science.
Or, this week, bubbles. Slightly lower tech, I would say.
It is, isn't it? Just like bubbles.
Just bubbles. We thought you'd ease you in gently. So this was a question that came in from a couple of best mates who were chatting at the back of a class and came up with this case for our investigation.
Hi, I'm Sophia.
And I'm Abby. Well, I saw videos of people online doing tricks where they get people inside a bubble, and I was thinking about how big of a bubble could you make in theory, and what would it have to be made out of to be able to make a really big bubble.
Abby and I sit together in most lessons, and she told me about this idea. And I was, my family's very into saving the planet, so I was like, what if you could get the Earth into the bubble and therefore create
whether you could use that to combat climate change.
But how could we get it that big without it popping?
Okay, so there is big stuff in here then. How do you make the biggest bubble? And I mean, why not? You could make a planet-sized bubble to save us from climate change. Why not?
Okay, I see how this show works now. That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I can see some technical challenges here.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Ahead.
Are you a fluid mechanics person?
Do you know what? I have a PhD in it.
Wow.
Not in bubbles, though. In droplets.
Yeah, but surely this is a bit like, you go to a doctor and you go, yeah, but you did feed at some stage. That's me point where you did bubbles as part of it.
Fluids that are enwrapped in surface tension? Yes, I do. But they're a different, a different phase.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
But, I think... I've dabbled in bubbles before. I can write you an equation.
Okay, which is more than I can do. I have to say more than I can do. But mainly, if I can dedicate this episode. Do we do that? Do we dedicate episodes?
Hey, you co-host, you can do whatever you damn well please.
Okay, fine. Right, okay. I want to dedicate it to the parents of my middle son's class who, along with me, when homeschooling began on whatever that day was in 2020, when the school said, right, we're going to be, okay, we'll send you the schedule, but no accompanying material. We'll just send you the schedule and then you can mimic the day at home, right? Okay. So we're sitting in the house and we clicked on it, and the very first day, and I have asked the other parents this, we all remember this vividly. The very first day said 9:30 to 11 a.m. bubbles. And it was part of a science lesson.
No other information?
No other information offered. And so we all had to riff a 90-minute science lesson about bubbles with an 8-year-old beside us. And it was science, bubbles. You and one child, that was done.
Couldn't sustain
5 minutes of that.
Take me back to school.
Yeah,
I can imagine with the shan't. Well, okay, I'm going to give you some exposure therapy, basically, for your bubble-related traumas, your history of that. I'm going to give you essentially material if ever you find yourself in this situation again. Yeah. Because I am going to hit you with a giant bubble straight away. Because we managed to track down the Guinness World Record holder for the biggest ever bubble. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to let you hear from the man himself.
Well, my name's Gary Perlman. They call me Dr. Awesome. I'm a professional bubbleologist. The records I hold right now is the tallest free-floating soap bubble and the tallest supported soap bubble. Then another one that I did is the largest outdoor free-floating soap bubble. And it was a bit windy that day. And the poles that I used were fishing poles, but they were mega size, like 20, 22 feet. So I had this huge monster lasso rope that I put on the dip. And for some reason, Mother Nature and the wind gods were in my favor, and I blew the bubble, and I've held that record since 2015. It was calculated by one of the directors here from NASA Glenn Space Center that's stationed here in Cleveland, Ohio. And with the blast of wind that I had, that bubble ended up being 3,399.7 cubic feet, or 96.27 meters. The guy actually took a day off from his job at NASA Glenn Space Center and came down to the field where I was doing it at 6 o'clock in the morning to come watch me blow a bubble.
That's Gary Perlman, who, as he says himself, they call me Dr. Awesome. Why don't they call you? I think you've very much forced the name on people, Dr. Awesome.
At least we now know if something goes wrong in the next NASA space mission, it's because this guy was taking a day off measuring bubbles.
It was when he introduced the word NASA that I think we all went, oh, hello. I wasn't expecting NASA to hear at any stage during this endeavour. But 96.27 metres.
I mean, it's big.
That is
big.
Huge, yeah.
Do you reckon his doctorate in bubbleology is legit?
It's from the legit University of Bubbleology.
Bubbletown.
Yeah. Look, he knows who he's talking about, as do our guests, I have to say.
Indeed, they do. These two who really are the real deal.
Yeah.
Because we have got Dr. Helen Chesky, an oceanographer and physicist at UCL, who is famous for her love of bubbles.
And I would like to point out that bubble physicist is a real job.
Bubble physicist,
I note your scepticism here, but this is a real job.
How about bubbleologist?
It's a different form of a real job.
Our other guest is Justin Burton, a physicist at Emory University in Atlanta. Justin, you wrote a paper that caught our eye. In the Physical Review of Fluids, you went with how to make a giant bubble. Am I right?
Yes, that's right.
By the way, how did you get into this? What drew you to bubbles, Justin?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been studying drops and bubbles ever since I was a PhD student back in the early 2000s in California, and generally interested in fluid mechanics that involve surface tension. I used to study how droplets break apart, and then I also studied bubbles in the same way and earned the nickname Dr. Bubbles. So maybe not Dr. Awesome, but Dr. Bubbles.
A lot of titles being thrown around in this field.
Yeah.
So, help us out. What's the shorthand?
You know, you just add a little soap and water together and you can make a bubble pretty easily. But it turns out to make the kind of bubbles that Gary was talking about, you need something special.
Okay, I'm presuming it's a materials question, basically, this. You have to get away from just a bit of washing up liquid and water.
That's right. For the work we published, we tested a few different recipes and kind of teased apart all the basic ingredients for making the world's biggest bubble.
So what's the secret? At a basic level, what's actually happening there?
Well, for any bubble to last a reasonable amount of time, you need something called a surfactant molecule. In the case of a soap bubble, we add it to there. These are molecules where one side likes to be in the air and then one side likes to be in the water, and they really stabilize this thin liquid film and make it last for a really long time. So that's the basic ingredients. But then the real secret is this stuff called guar gum, which is a seed that's grown in India, but you can then grind it up and make a powder out of it and soak it in water. And the polysaccharides form these long chain polymers after you soak them in water for a bit. And you don't need much, just need a spoonful, a couple of grams per liter. And you'll turn your soap bubble mix into this kind of soupy, stretchy liquid that when you try to pull a soap film, it is able to stretch ridiculously fast without breaking. That's really the secret.
Does the gloopy stuff, the long polymers, are they helping the water to make a bubble, or is the water helping them to make a bubble? Whose surface tension? Is it a combination of the two?
Where the polymers come in, and think of them as like chains with hooks on them, or like Christmas lights or something. You know, you try to pull them apart really quickly and they start to stretch out and they resist that stretching, and they can also entangle with each other. And then they create this kind of entangled network of molecules that help keep this liquid film stable and resist. You can even like poke your finger through it and not break the soap bubble. It's really amazing how much stability these things give it.
How big are we talking? How big can your bubbles get with this recipe?
I would say the biggest one we've ever made, we could put, we put my son and a dog inside of a bubble that we made in front of my house.
How are they getting on? Are they okay?
It took a while. We had to call the fire department to get them out. The bubble was so resistant to breaking.
By the way, just for context, so your biggest bubble fits a boy and a dog inside it. Dr. Awesome's, just to picture it, roughly the size of a double-decker bus. So we have actually had mixed up some of Justin's recipe.
Really?
Of bubble juice.
Okay, can we stop calling it that?
Should we see
mixture is the word. It's mixture, bubble mixture.
Look, it's in the script, I'm reading it. All right, okay. That's the end of it.
And are we going to have a go?
Why not?
Do we have a small child and a dog?
No, unfortunately.
Okay.
No double-decker bus.
That's the unit by which we're measuring this, is a small child and a dog. But yes.
All right.
Okay, fine.
So this is recipe. This is, according to Justin's research, this is guar gum dissolved in rubbing alcohol, a bit of baking soda.
Yep.
And, just a little bit of washing up liquid in there for good measure, and water.
And water, of course. Water being the most important.
So I have to point out that I'm looking through the window at the face of the radio engineer to see what he's going to do when these bubbles drift across the studio with all the expensive electronics.
That is a small wand.
It's a tiny wand.
Do you know what? That is a good bubble, though.
Yeah?
Yeah, they're very colourful.
I would say it is a quarter of the size of your head.
Yeah, no. I wasn't going for size. It's a small wand.
It still hasn't popped.
It hasn't popped. It still hasn't popped. Yeah, which is just a measure of how the water is being held inside, isn't it?
So it's not draining very quickly. Those are the two things that stop it. If the water evaporates or if it just drains down to the bottom. So bubbles like this tend to pop at the top because it drains away, and then the two sides pop at the top.
Unfortunately, because this is radio, you couldn't see how perfectly on cue that bubble popped.
It popped just as you said it. It was amazing. Okay,
let me ask you some questions about the physics of this then, Helen.
While Dara plays with his bubbles over there. He's actually, you were making fun before, but you're looking like a happy small child now making bubbles.
Bubbles are great fun. It's a fun thing. And we can pretend like, tell me about tell me about the science. I'm just going to be sitting here doing this.
Just playing with bubbles.
Yes. That's literally what I'm doing. Go on.
All right, surface tension is the secret here.
Yes.
Why is it only on the surface?
So, the thing about a bubble is it's a pocket of gas enclosed in a liquid. And so you need a gas and a liquid, but if you just have those two things, they're not very good. And the reason is that the surface tension of water, this tendency to be elastic, is so powerful that it will pull itself inwards really quickly and basically pop anything. So you need to stop the surface doing that. So that's why you need these surfactant molecules that will sit at the surface and stop it stop it trying to move so violently, basically. And then the polymers, they make it more viscous, they make it harder for it to drain. He's still playing with his bubbles.
Same bubbles.
And so basically the behaviour of bubbles is all about the surface, because that's the critical interface between the liquid and the gas, and that's what determines what happens next.
That act of the water pulling itself inwards, that's the thing that makes it spherical.
Yes, that's right. So a sphere is that if you've got a fixed amount of film, that's the way to minimise the surface area. But if you don't have to make soap bubbles that are spherical. People have done these wonderful things where they dip in kind of wire frames that are all kind of strange shapes, and you dip them in, and the soap film it has to touch all the edges, but the shape you get in between can be quite striking. And in fact, there was an architect in the 1970s called Fry Otto who designed buildings based on this principle. So the stadium, the Munich Olympic Stadium, the way he designed it was he held wire frames, he put them in bubble solution, lifted them out, and if there's a sort of three-dimensional structure, the bubble films they sort of curve in weird ways. Well, he designed a stadium based on that minimal surface thing, and so bubbles have been actually really interesting because it's solving a maths problem. That film is solving how to minimise the surface area, and before they could calculate that, they could just get some bubbles to do it.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
So a lot of the fragility of bubbles seems to be about the water running down out of it and making the film so thin that eventually it breaks. So let's do this where the water isn't going to run down. If we go to a zero gravity situation, what happens to bubbles there?
Well, think of all the very serious things NASA has to do on the International Space Station, but it turns out bubbles have made it to the top of the list on at least one occasion. And they've done quite a lot of experiments on bubbles in zero gravity to see what happens. And the first thing is that you can blow bubbles, it works in the same way, but they don't have to be as thin. So bubbles on Earth drain very quickly. They tend to be very thin. You can see that one is kind of dripping liquid off the bottom of it. But in space, there's no reason for them to get thinner, right? Nothing is falling down. So the liquid layer can actually be thicker. And there was an astronaut called Naoko Yamazaki who had a young daughter when she went to the space station. The daughter said, "Why do we not have coloured bubbles?" And so she took some red food dye with her and she blew bubbles that were red. And they were red because nothing's falling down, they could be thicker. And so you could see the red food dye. So the reason that if you put coloured food dye in one of these bubbles, a soap bubble, the reason you can't see any colour is because it's just too thin. It's so thin, there's almost nothing there. There's almost no dye in there. So you can't see the colour. But if you make it a bit thicker, like Naaki could on the International Space Station, then there's enough liquid in there to actually see the dye, and then you can blow bubbles that are any colour you like.
And that will stick around for a bit longer.
And will stay,
will stay
around.
Full stop.
Yeah, well, there's nowhere for them to go. I mean, unless they evaporate or someone bumps into them, they just kind of sit there. So, yeah. It's very funny watching the astronauts do this. So there's video of astronauts playing with this, and you think all the very serious things astronauts have to do. They are giggling like small children while they're playing with these bubbles.
Much like us. So
I've literally spent the last 5 minutes just making giant bubbles over here, half listening to what you're saying. It's very interesting. But the question then is, if you're in space in zero gravity, what if you're outside of a warmed environment, if you're just out in space? Could you do that? In the vacuum of space, could you blow a bubble?
It wouldn't last very long. Gas just disappears, things evaporate. There's nothing to stop it. There's no humidity. There's nothing sort of bouncing on it to keep it in. And so it would evaporate incredibly quickly. So a soap film in the vacuum of space basically wouldn't survive.
Okay, this doesn't sound good for their grand idea of enveloping the Earth, but just hold on to your horses.
You might be able to freeze that bubble, though, too.
Well, you might be able to freeze the bubble, says Justin. You know what? I've got a little bit of science to bring to the table here. Okay, so far we've learned bubbles on the Earth. It's all about surface tension. If you want to get a really big bubble, you've got to get your bubble juice right, to get the polymers in the right way. And that bubbles in space are possible, even if they won't hang around for very long. But, okay, I want to take this to the next level because we did also discover a frankly absurd project by actual scientists based at MIT in the US, and they are exploring whether or not you could set up a massive raft of bubbles in space to reflect sunlight, sort of a last-ditch resort to save us from climate change. Here is Professor Carlo Ratti, who is leading the MIT people project that is literally called Space Bubbles.
When I talk to my colleagues, well, everybody's concerned about the temperatures we've been seeing over the past 12 to 18 months. So there's a growing concern. Clearly, we need to work on the planet on mitigation and adaptation. But do we have a plan B? Well, the only plan B we might have is actually to reflect a small percentage of the sunlight incoming on the planet, say 1, 2, or 3%. And by doing so, we can actually cool down the Earth. Think about something like an umbrella, more or less the size of Brazil, to be placed in between the Earth and the Sun. In order to do that, you need to think about how to ship a lot of material outside the planet. You need to think about how to fabricate in space. And also you need to think about a system that's dynamic enough so you can control it, change it, adapt it, and eventually remove it. Clearly, what you want to do is have the maximum surface with a minimum thickness. And well, the beautiful thing about bubbles, you get this very, very thin surface, just a few molecules thick. The second thing, you can fabricate in space more easily. And the third thing, you can actually put them together and create 3D arrays that then you can actuate, move, and control. This is only a last resort. Again, we should fix our problems here on the planet, but still, it would be important to have a plan B.
Who knew that Plan B stood for bubbles? A Brazil-sized umbrella. What do you reckon, Dara?
I love the idea just as an idea. I think it's amazing because it would be, you have to fly it out into space. You create I'm presuming you could make a fairly thick bubble in this situation, obviously. And that might be the one thing that would, but I'm feeling a no coming from you here in terms of.
And just, the bit of the many things that made me raise an eyebrow in this, the one that got it's the bit about it being the size of Brazil. I mean, that's quite big. And so the effort it required to put all that up there and to launch it and then to maintain it. What happens if a little meteorite comes along and just nudges in, hits it and just pushes it off course somewhere and it just drifts off to the wrong place and starts shading Mars instead? I mean, that's no good.
Well, I think Mars, we're not going to get any angry letters from Mars saying that you've taken our sunlight away. I presume the idea is the place you have to be was what's known as the Lagrange point, which is the point in space where the gravitational pull of the sun and the Earth is the same. So you can stick something there and it'll stay there. I suppose the idea is that the Brazil thing would shield Earth entirely, but take a little bit of the sunlight off us.
So, yeah, I mean, the problem with climate change is the problem of Earth accumulating extra energy. So you can say that, well, if you stop some energy coming in, then maybe that helps solve the problem. It doesn't solve the problems of, ocean acidification and air pollution and all of those things. But it might stop the energy problem if you didn't take so much energy to do it that it counteracted anything it stopped coming in.
Details.
Someone's not seeing the big picture here.
Where's the optimism? Justin, back me up on this.
Well, he's right that this would be the ideal way to do it. So maybe, you go to a party and somebody has one of those foam machines that's just pushing out, kind of a foam of bubbles that, people like to run around in and play in, stuff like that. And that looks white. And that looks white because there's so many bubbles that when the light comes in there, it scatters in all different directions. But it doesn't take that much liquid or whatever liquid they plan on using for this to make it. So I can imagine a bubble machine sitting out there in space, constantly pumping out this foam until it's the size of Brazil. I don't think it's impossible. You certainly get the biggest bang for the buck in terms of reflecting light and having a least amount of material possible.
Yeah, you're talking about a silicon polymer here. You're talking about a very, 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 very small amount of gas because you've got the vacuum of space, as you mentioned, Helen. And the idea is that these things, they just freeze. It's a bit like when you go in your garden in the dead of winter and you blow bubbles and they freeze. It's like that, but just in space.
I've got this mental picture of the clangers blowing bubbles. And it makes me happy. I'll give you that.
I just meant a picture of the bit where the an umbrella in the shape of Brazil lines up over Brazil, and the people of Brazil go, whoa, 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 whoa! Why did we lose out here? Why did you do it this way? That feels unfair.
Oh, was that not part of the plan originally?
I don't think they signed up for this. Whatever it's grand. Okay, so we get an umbrella the same. Okay, fine, cool, yeah, absolutely.
People have been talking about this idea for a long time. Putting something in front of the Earth to divert some of the sunlight. Think of a giant lens or something like that. But this bubble idea, I think, actually could possibly work.
Well, there is a serious point about why bubbles would be an interesting structure for this, and it's because bubbles are interesting because they're a liquid and a gas not mixing, but together they can do things that neither one of those things can do. So, for example, if you have a latte and, it's got foam on top, you can you can sort of put a spoon flat on it and it will support the weight. But the gas doesn't do that. If you put a spoon in midair, it just falls through the gas. And if you put a spoon on top of water, it would just fall through the water. But if you mix the liquid and the gas together in the right form, you do have something which will take the weight of a spoon. And so bubbles do form these very lightweight structures. And foam like that is very useful in all sorts of places. So that's the serious idea.
A very, very small amount of material, and presumably something that you could undo quite quickly if you decided that actually you were deflecting light in the wrong direction.
With a big pin.
With a big pin.
No, now we're going to fly a pin to the Lagrange point. Now we've got to build a second robot.
If only we could call up NASA and get them to help, but unfortunately they're too busy measuring double-decker bus-sized bubbles on Earth.
I just feel there's a lot of unforeseen consequences that we haven't thought through here. And then we have a second round of fundraising for Earth's Saviour 2, which is just a pin that we fly up and the pin pops all the bubbles. But still, look, I like it. I like it and it's also, I'd imagine also the closest we're going to get to, can we, because we're not going to be able to build one single giant bubble over us.
No, that's
anyway.
absurd. That's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, but lots of bubbles at, way off into space could be the thing.
Could be. You look at you. You're old.
I've come around to it actually, because I expected more. Yeah. I expected to be in with you guys on this, but actually you're like, that's actually probably right. Yeah, that could probably work. So yeah, let's go for it. Okay, enough of space for the time being and science fiction. Coming down to Earth though for a moment, Helen, you research bubbles in the ocean, which is a different kind of bubble. And isn't it true that these bubbles already have a massive and kind of underappreciated impact on our climate?
They do, yeah. So underwater bubbles, they're the really fun bubbles because they do all kinds of interesting, they're a lot more dynamic, basically. And so it is the case that, the ocean is massive and the atmosphere is massive, and the layer between them, the ocean surface, that's where you get breaking waves. Breaking waves make bubbles. And bubbles are like little packets of the atmosphere pushed down into the ocean. So they actually help the ocean breathe in. So if you get a really big storm at sea, which is the kind of thing I study, you're out in a big ship and there's these enormous waves around you, big breaking waves, you can see the bubble plumes underwater. And what you can also see is that all of that is pushing gas underwater, extra gas. And the two gases that matter are carbon dioxide and oxygen that bubbles speed up the transfer of those gases into the ocean. Now, it depends where on the planet you are. So near the equator, the ocean tends to be breathing out carbon dioxide. And then the North Atlantic, for example, it tends to be breathing in.
But are those bubbles not constantly trying to rise upwards through the water?
Yeah, but even so, they're still underwater for long enough to push that gas into the water. And you can see this, right? So just over Christmas, I was out in the Labrador Sea in the northwest corner of the North Atlantic, big stormy seas. And I had oxygen sensors that were just half a metre and less than half a metre below the surface, right? So right up at the top. And every time you get a breaking wave, you get a stonking great big spike in oxygen because those bubbles are pushing oxygen into the ocean. And if that water then moves downwards, then you're moving that gas deeper into the ocean. And the only way, all those weird deep ocean creatures with kind of lights, little fishing rods with lights on coming out of their heads, they breathe oxygen, and the place that oxygen comes from is the surface. And it turns out that the way oxygen goes down, it seems to happen during the very stormy periods, and it seems that bubbles are making a difference.
Is that part of the reason why the oceans are carbon sink? Because there's carbon dioxide in those bubbles too, right?
Yes. The ocean has taken up around 30% of the carbon dioxide that we've put into the atmosphere, the extra. And the question is, will it continue to do that? And that's why studying the bubbles is important.
It's quite interesting then that all of this fancy pants sci-fi turns out bubbles are already helping with climate change. Yes. That's certainly what I'm taking away from it. So it remains then to thank both of our guests, Justin Besant and Helen Cherski. Thank you very much for joining us. So, my friend, how's that bubble trauma?
If I'd known all this at the start of lockdown, I could have made it would be the best bubble lesson ever.
You'd barely have had time to blow any bubbles.
Yeah, I've been there going, oh, time's up. And they're going, no, Father, please, which is the way they address me. Father, please, tell me more about the bubbles.
Well, then, in terms of our questioners, then we've got the answer for you there.
Yeah, Abby wanted to know how you make it. Guar gum, Guar gum, or any gloopy thing added to the soap. It will work.
And if you want to save the planet from climate change by using bubbles in space, you can. Just not in the way you were thinking at all.
Yeah, not one big one, but loads of little ones.
Yeah, and also maybe don't do that for fear of unintended consequences.
Who knows? People in Brazil are thoughts are with you. Subscribe to Curious Cases on BBC Sounds and make sure you've got push notifications turned on, and we'll let you know as soon as new episodes are available.
Imagine a scrap of data that could help rescue a man lost at sea.
That far north, most people aren't found. This is a race against the clock.
Or expose staggering financial fraud.
All the Swiss banks, the British banks, the French banks. What I was looking at was a horror show.
Or uncover a medical breakthrough.
Within 10 years, the whole world was convinced that he was right.
10 extraordinary adventures of data and discovery. Uncharted with me, Hannah Fry, on Radio 4. Now available on BBC Sounds.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
This BBC podcast is supported by ads outside the UK.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
You're about to listen to a brand new episode of Curious Cases. Shows are going to be released weekly, wherever you get your podcasts. But if you're in the UK, you can listen to the latest episodes first on BBC Sounds. I'm Hannah Fry.
And I'm Dara O'Brien.
And this is Curious Cases.
The show where we take your quirkiest questions,
your crunchiest conundrums,
and then we solve them.
With the power of science.
I mean, do we always solve them?
I mean, the hit rate's pretty low.
But it is with science.
It is with science. Dara O'Brien.
Hannah Fry.
Where do you stand on eating food off floors?
I'll answer that, but can we just dial it back slightly?
Sure.
Because it's fun to do this series. But I am new here, and there's been no meeting. Like, who are these people who are sending in the questions?
It's the format, Dara.
Yeah, but you got to sit me down and go, curios. What are curios?
This is the name that the listeners gave themselves. The other alternatives included quiduncs.
Okay.
Which I, at the time when that was suggested, looked it up and then immediately forgot what the definition was.
Right, okay. So curious are the listeners. Right, I'm writing this down.
Yep.
Where do the questions go to?
So they tend to come into curiouscases@bbc.co.uk.
Brilliant.
And they're the sort of questions that, you know, when you've got an annoying 8-year-old and they ask you stuff and you're not sure what the answers are.
Ah, okay.
That's our favourites.
Yeah, okay. I can get behind that. See, this is the kind of stuff that I just took the gig. I didn't question it too closely.
Didn't even get a welcome email.
There was no, where's the fruit basket?
Where were the trumpets?
It's some sense of like, well, it's your first day. No, you just came straight in with a question.
I think if anything, Dara, this is a great compliment to you that you've slotted in perfectly with the team and you required no introduction. Can you remember a time in your life when you weren't sat in this studio with me?
I can't actually at this stage. There's a question in itself, like what was BC in this situation to my AD?
BCC, be on curious cases.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the question this week?
This one was sent in by Quinn. We've been asked to settle an argument about the 5-second rule. Is it okay to eat something if you pick it up off the floor within 5 seconds of touching it?
I would call it the 3-second rule.
Would you?
Yeah, I would. Yeah,
yeah. More bacteria in Ireland?
No, but quicker bacteria in Ireland. Bacteria in Ireland is trained to just move fast. Do you know what I always imagine when I think of the 3-second rule? First, I always imagine toast. Like there's a bacteria sitting on a floor, right? And then this toast appears and then it comes down, slow down to it. Like the movie Inception, that the whole landscape just flips over and suddenly the piece of bacteria has gone from sitting on top of a surface to being both on top of a surface and beneath another surface. And like it's like kind of just lasso, or hook itself on.
Is that what it's spending the first 4 seconds doing? Just looping the lasso around its head?
Trying to hook its way onto this new...
Only on the 5th second does it succeed.
Yeah. And that's why it works as a 3-second rule, but not as a 5-second rule. Because it's 4 seconds to build a grappling hook for bacteria to hook onto the piece of toast.
Does butter change this scenario or just make it a lot more slimy?
Oh, I think it would, wouldn't it? I mean, like butter is like it's an access route,
What's your general rules here, actually? Where are your boundaries?
If it's soup, no. That's where I draw the line.
What if it was soup on your own kitchen worktop and you were really hungry?
Do I have a straw?
No, but you have a finger.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's absolutely grand. Yeah. A taste thing on a work surface, yeah.
This rule of never soup has fallen apart very quickly.
Well, there's a volume element as well. I mean, because if I'm dabbing the top of the soup rather than scooping it all, I presume like I was taking my hand and I was pushing it off the edge into a bowl I'm holding at the side of the...
And that would be a no, huh?
No, I don't think it'd be entirely a no. Different situation. Child with an ice cream. Icing falls out.
Oh, see, now this is an extra dimension, which is the pressure of the scenario.
Yes.
Yeah. I think always okay.
As long as it's not like dusty and so you can't see it.
I mean, even then, I think if you can just pick the bits off.
Yeah, true.
The risk of them actually dying is very small.
You've got to presume that, Modern medicine. Or maybe is that exactly what we have to find out?
One thing I would say that maybe there's a fourth dimension to this, because I think that there is the judgment of others. Because if a child drops a lollipop, for example, even on a subway, I would happily just, give it a bit of polish back in the mouth. Unless there was another parent watching.
Absent of all of that, would you more willingly give it to the child than you would to yourself?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, okay, I agree with that. So the least hygienic situation is a child where no one else can judge you and you want peace and quiet.
Yeah.
And then it literally doesn't matter what it is or what it's fallen on. Back in the mouth.
I think so. Okay, well, should we find out the actual science?
I think we're obliged to.
I think we probably are.
What little I've learned about the show in the weeks that I've been doing it is that at some point smarter people come on. Hopefully our guest today can help us settle this matter. Professor Sally Bloomfield is the chair of the International Scientific Forum on Home Hygiene, and Dr. Ellen Evans researches food safety behaviour at Cardiff Metropolitan University. And Professor Don Schaffner is a food microbiologist who has actually put the 5-second rule to the test. Don, okay, I think most people have heard of some version of this rule. Do we know where it came from?
I've heard that Genghis Khan had something called the 5-hour rule, which was after his horde invaded, his men were allowed to eat anything that had been on the ground for less than 5 hours. But I'm pretty sure that's apocryphal.
How were the stopwatches in those days?
Well, exactly. That's why it had to be 5 hours. We probably used a sundial.
But there is this idea, though, that food is sort of, I don't know, like inherently safe if you pick it off the floor after a particular period of time. Or I guess the opposite of that is that if you leave it long enough, it becomes unsafe.
We showed that that's just really not true. There was no one period of time that was super short where no bacteria transferred. So in the experiments that we did, even when we tried to pick the food up off the surface as quickly as possible, some of the bacteria transferred.
Even if it came off the floor like 1 second later?
Well, we didn't actually use a floor. We actually used little pieces of floor in a laboratory. But yes, we had an experiment where we put it down and picked it up as quickly as possible, and we always saw some bacteria transfer.
Does that mean the 5-second rule is there's no particular threshold there?
See, it's complicated because for some foods and some surfaces, the longer it sat there, the more bacteria transferred. But what I'm saying is there was no quote unquote safe amount of time where no bacteria transferred.
So do some foods attract more bacteria from surfaces than others? How's soup in this spectrum?
We didn't study soup, but we did study watermelon. And I can tell you, and other people have done similar experiments to show, it's the moisture of the food that really drives the transfer, right? The bacteria are tiny. They don't have legs. Some of them have flagella and they swim around, but they don't swim very fast. So if you drop a wet food like watermelon, you're going to transfer almost all the bacteria from that surface instantaneously. But if you drop a dry food like a piece of bread or a gummy candy, those were two that we studied, we didn't see as many bacteria transfer.
What kind of bacteria are we talking about here, though? Is it are we talking about dangerous stuff, or is just like, happy little guys who won't really cause that much harm at all?
The particular microorganism that we used was one that was not pathogenic, but there's other people have done research with pathogens and they basically behave the same way.
What about the different surfaces then? Because if that's the food, but the surface as well, presumably this matters.
Well, it does, but in kind of a weird way. So one of the surfaces that we studied was carpet, which was a very, shallow pile carpet. We saw less bacteria transfer from the carpet, but I think that's really more an artifact of the way that we did the experiment. So, for example, imagine we took a tiny little test tube full of liquid with bacteria in it. We put that onto a hard surface and we put that onto a carpet surface. Well, what happens when the bacteria went onto the carpet surface? They sunk down below the top level of the carpet. And so there were probably fewer bacteria available at the top of that carpet to transfer, so we saw less transfer. That doesn't mean that we should all immediately run out and start carpeting our kitchens. That would be a terrible idea, because, of course, the dirt and the bacteria and everything is going to hide down in the carpet.
There's also a trampling factor that sounds like you haven't taken into account.
No, we did not study trampling.
So, okay, carpet's bad, soup bad, watermelon bad.
Okay, often that feels quite intuitive. John, can I ask about how bacteria transfers? Because we tend to maybe anthropomorphize this as if a piece of toast falls, the bacteria spots it, goes, hello, toast, that's better than what I'm on at the moment, and then travels towards it or wishes to go onto it. As if the 5-second rule was somehow the commuting limit.
Well, some bacteria have flagella, which are like little tails that propel them, right? And some don't. But I think really what's fundamentally driving this is the moisture. And so if there's moisture there, the bacteria are attracted to the moisture and they just move with the moisture. So they get into the moisture of the watermelon and then they move with the watermelon.
Oh, are they not like tasty sugar?
No. Yes, that's what I presumed it was. That you accidentally dip it into their world and they're like, hello, I'm having a bit of this.
Broccoli, no thanks.
Yeah.
Certainly they are attracted to things like sugar, and they'll move to environments that have a higher sugar concentration or a higher nutrient concentration. But the problem is that's happening on a completely different timescale. Remember, these microorganisms are very small. Even if they're swimming at full speed, they don't swim that fast. And so really at the point where we're studying food being dropped on the floor, it's really not about the biology.
Well, okay, I mean, because we're eliminating ants, presumably, from this inquiry. We're basically talking bacteria. It's not a case of if you drop an ice lolly in the garden, you will attract a lot more than just bacteria.
Why stop at ants? Let's go mice, let's go rats.
Absolutely. Okay, grand. All vermin we're including in this. Yeah. Because what were the timescales you did, Don, in your experiment?
We studied a fraction of a second, 5 seconds, 30 seconds, and 300 seconds. So very, very short on the time scale. Probably not enough to attract ants or other vermin.
If you're waiting 300 seconds, I mean, was that to have a base level? Was that kind of because no one is going, I dropped some toast, I'll come back in 5 minutes.
Well, microbiologists like me like to think in orders of magnitude. So if we were going to study 30 seconds, one order of magnitude higher would be 300 seconds. But you're right. A person is probably not waiting 300 seconds.
Sally, can I bring you in here? Is this the wrong way to think about hygiene?
It is slightly, yes. Because one thing you haven't said is most pathogenic bacteria and all viruses cannot live outside people. So if they get into the environment, they're looking for a new host. They need to get into your body before they can start breeding again. So finding a bit of toast, they're not going to be able to live there. Non-pathogenic organisms, yes, they can live anywhere. A lot of them are what we call ubiquitous. But the really harmful ones need to get into a human body where they've got special nutrients like vitamins and things like that. And the same with viruses have got to go inside living cells. They can, jig around, but until they find a new host that suits them, they won't start breeding again.
So it's not that they won't necessarily be on kitchen surfaces or floors.
They will, because
But not
we
real.
move them around. We're the culprits. You know, most harmful microbes come from people or our pets or our food. And they'd stay there until we do something. So when we cut up a chicken, we move it. When we cough and sneeze, we move it. So we propel microbes around our home, around our environment, and we have the power to stop them. That's what hygiene's about.
So it's more danger that we drop this. By the way, the toast is my unit of currency in this entire discussion or whatever, which is the whole butter side down, butter side up thing, which is another episode, I presume. But our piece of toast, it's more of a danger that we drop it onto a work surface we haven't cleaned after you putting a chicken down before we roast it or whatever. That.
Yeah, because if you think of the way we live these days, our house floors are relatively clean. We keep poo away when we take the dog out for a walk. We don't have horses on the streets and this type of thing. So the chances of there being some real nasties on the floor is relatively low. But that doesn't mean to say that touching things isn't important, because things touch surfaces which are higher up and which we're all touching. That's where the real problem is.
Does that mean a work surface, just on average, is more likely to be dangerous than the floor?
Well, yes, but it's what that work surface is being used for. You know, if it's tucked in a corner, it doesn't come into contact with harmful microbes, because it's about, we call it risk management. It's microbes, pathogens are a hazard, but they're only a risk if you're exposed to them.
Okay, if you're saying that the stuff that can really harm you or hurt you comes from other animals or humans, if you had a really grimy concrete floor that happened to be in a place where there weren't any other humans around, can you just eat merrily off it?
It should be all right. But remember, you've got things like chemicals and all this sort of thing that, you know, it's not just about microbes.
But if you find yourself in a forest without a plate, don't worry.
Well, I would think so, unless there could be animals around. You never know, quite know.
Okay.
But no, it's yes, I'll stick by it.
By the way, so we're really just looking for some way for this to be okay to eat off the floor. So if you initiate a kitchen system, which is, it's just you obviously in this house, you've no pets, and you hose your kitchen down into a sluice or a drain at one end regularly, in that situation, it's okay to pick food off the floor.
Well, not even that, because how do they get there in the first place?
Yeah.
They've either got to come in on your shoes or they've got to come in on the air. And the main ones are from people, pets, and raw foods.
Okay. And kids eating from raisins, for example, and dropping them, picking them up, dropping them, picking them up. That's...
Yeah, it's about what they're doing with their hands. Did they wash their hands before they started picking them up? Were they on a tube station where they'd touched all the rails and somebody else had touched those rails? I'd be far more worried about their hands than I would about the floor that they were picking it up off.
I feel like this is becoming almost like a Zen exercise, that we have to... we're focusing on the grape and you are focusing on the entire universe. And we have got this wrong. We have to think beyond the raisin that has been dropped and into the whole world that they're in.
Eat the raisins off the floor, just don't eat it with your hands, okay?
Yes.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
There's a phrase I think you've used, the journey of the germ.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Germs are moving all the time. I think when we had hand washing during COVID, you know, they kept saying, wash your hands frequently. Well, what does that mean? You know, just wash them frequently. We should be washing them at a moment when there may be a risk, when we've just come home from work and we've been touching all sorts of things, or we've just been preparing a chicken and it could be contaminated. So it's about visualising rather than just saying, oh, I was told that I must wash my hands after going to the toilet, I must before handling food, after handling raw food. We've got these sort of rules in our mind, but they don't relate to anything. They're just suspended in space. In fact, what they're doing is to stop germs moving from a source to us.
Okay, well, so far we've been talking quite a lot about the kitchen because, of course, as you say, Sally, this is where we're doing a lot of our food preparation and eating. But Ellen, I know that you actually study people in their kitchens and watch what they're doing when they're preparing their food. Tell us a little bit about that.
Anna, you make me sound as if I'm peeking in through people's windows, which is not what I do.
Just don't invite you to a dinner party. That's the rule.
I'm definitely coming around to have dinner with you, as long as I don't have to eat off the floor. At the university, we've got a kitchen, which is much like a kitchen you'd have at home. But we've got some CCTV cameras in there, so we can see what people do. So it might be that they are trying to wash their hands, every time they handle raw chicken, but it's only through watching them that we can see, are they using soap? Quite often see hands being held underneath a running tap, and then hands dried on clothing. So there's always much room for improvement in terms of hygiene practices.
And are you seriously telling me that I can't rub the bacteria off onto a cloth? Is that... I mean,
This seems to contradict what Don was saying earlier.
Yeah, I thought the whole point of it that I could break the bacteria by rubbing my hands together and then just deflect it onto a piece of cloth instead. That's not the case?
Well, do you need a cloth that's covered in bacteria? You're going to hopefully put that chicken in the oven, and once you've reached a safe temperature, that bacteria should be killed, so it's not going to make you ill. So you're just creating problems and more work for yourself by trying to clean it.
What about other parts of cooking, though? What about, in their fridges? Are people nice and hygienic in their fridges, Ellen?
Oh, don't get me going about fridges. I'm obsessed with fridge temperatures. So the temperature of the fridge can have a huge impact on how bacteria in that food can grow. Unfortunately, a lot of fridges don't have thermometers in them, or people don't have thermometers to use. And so people just trust that the fridge is cold enough. You open a fridge, you take the milk out. If it's at 7.5 degrees, it's still going to feel cold. It's quite difficult for as humans to tell just by touch. Is this less than 5 degrees? Is it just above 5 degrees? And when it comes to something like listeria, if we've got something at 7.5 degrees Celsius, it's going to grow much, much quicker than at 5 degrees.
Can I ask a question about the reheating of things? Is it chicken is the great danger in terms of reheating? What is
I heard it was rice.
Rice danger to reheat?
Yes, rice contains spores, organisms that resist drying. So out in the fields, these bacillus organisms, which are what we're talking about, get onto the rice, and it's resistant to heat. But what the heat does is to cause the spores to germinate. And so if you eat the rice immediately after it's been boiled and eat it, it's perfectly safe. But then you leave it at room temperature, those spores have germinated and can start growing.
And so therefore, if you don't finish your takeaway, let's say, or your eating meal, the rice has to go.
It really should, yeah.
Or just eat it in one. That's fine. That's also fine.
That's okay as a second plan. I'm sure that also works. But in the unlikely situation that it's left over, that's the bad thing to leave in for any period of time.
You may reheat the food and get rid of the bacteria, but the toxins that they've produced is still in the food. So that's another reason for not reheating things. It depends on the organism. But
you're anti-reheating at all?
I mean, if I keep it in the fridge, then there's quite a lot of things I do reheat. So it's not a blanket thing, but something you've got to be careful of.
What about reheating twice?
Oh dear, you would, wouldn't you, ask that? I have no idea.
Oh, fine. That's not. Sorry, I presume they're saying that you're going. Oh, Hannah, it's a wonder you've survived this far. That's
disgusting
really
woman.
Let me offer maybe a slightly different perspective. I had leftover rice for breakfast this morning. I will have leftover rice probably for a couple of more days. I'm not worried because I know the temperature of my fridge. But most importantly, and I don't think either Ellen or Sally have touched on this, but I think they'll agree it's quite important. If you're going to cool a cooked food, you need to cool that food promptly. That's where the risk from Bacillus cereus in rice comes in. Cool the food quickly and promptly. If there are no pathogenic bacteria in the food, once it's cooled and in the fridge, they're not going to be spontaneously generated. And I will reuse rice multiple times. But again, I know my fridge temperature and I know that I properly cooled that rice before I put it into the fridge. And same with chicken and other foods.
Honestly, I've always let things cool gently before I put them into the fridge. I've never thought that you instantly, once you decide I'm not eating this, you put the hot food into the fridge.
You can let it cool at room temperature for a bit, but after an hour, then I would definitely move it to the fridge.
Okay.
One thing you don't want to do, Dara, is put hot food in the fridge because then you can be increasing the temperature of the fridge. And it can take ages for that temperature to come back down to normal.
It's just a minefield everywhere you turn.
Unbelievably difficult to do this.
It's a wonder that we are still alive.
The risks of not eating still outweigh the risks of eating. So we have to keep eating, folks.
Okay, that's good. Well, I mean, if there's any message to take from this, that is a reassuring one. Sally, clearly we need in terms of be clever about home hygiene. But there is an idea that floats around that it's good for us to expose ourselves to different germs, that we can be too clean? Is this a ridiculous modern notion, or is this true?
Oh, the hygiene hypothesis,
yes.
The dreaded hygiene hypothesis. I mean, underneath there is a real truth here, but because it's become called the hygiene hypothesis, it's become distorted out of all imagination to be, we need exposure to harmful pathogens, germs, to keep our immune system strong. And that is rubbish. Yes, we do need exposure to microbes, but it's about the right sort of microbes. The point is that we don't need a strong immune system. We need a well-regulated immune system. That is, we need an immune system that when it meets a pathogen, a harmful organism, it reacts and will destroy those organisms. But when our body sees things like pollen and foods, if it does react to those, and it can react to those, that's when we get allergies and that's when we get problems. So what we need is our immune system to be regulated so that it kills harmful microbes and tolerates other things. How do we get to that immune system? Well, it's because of exposure to microbes, these old friends microbes, okay? And the best way to describe it is to think of our immune system like a computer program. We're born with a fully formed immune system, but as we go through the first days, months, hours, and so forth of our life, we are gradually exposed to more and more organisms. When we come down the birth canal, we're exposed to these important old friends organisms. When our mother breastfeeds us, we're exposed to them. With our sisters and brothers, we're exposed to them. Importantly, also when we go outdoors. So it's not just human organisms, it's also outdoor organisms. And these old friends program our immune systems so they will react to harmful things and they won't react to non-harmful things. So if you think about it, it's actually not about hygiene, it's about lifestyle. It's finding ways of making sure that children do interact with their environment, but hygiene is applied, and we were talking about targeted hygiene. Again, that's why targeted hygiene is so important, because it maximises protecting us against harmful organisms and leaves us free to be exposed to other types of important organisms.
So allowing children to play fairly freely,
eat your
outdoors.
floors.
Yes, I mean they'll sit in a garden or a park, whatever, and they will put things in their mouths or whatever. That sort of thing is a fairly natural process.
Yes, it is, and I mean sometimes it happens, that people do get ill. But they don't happen that often, and we have to live with risk.
There's a nice idea then, because I think that people sort of have taken this, like, you're living in too sterile an environment to mean that you should be exposing yourself sort of willy-nilly, as it were. Just, all dirt is good dirt. But you're saying that it's very specific types of microbes that are important.
Yes, and we call them old friends. It's my colleague, Professor Graham Rook, who came up with this idea of old friends. And he's saying that it was when we were back in the hunter-gatherer times, when we were living within our environment and our immune system was developing. And it was at that moment that these organisms took over this role of programming the immune system. Now, I can see, Dari, you're giving me one of those looks.
What look?
Because even Graham Rook can't explain to me exactly how it happens biochemically. Because if we could find out, is it an organism or is it a particular molecule in this organism? Because if it was, then we could start exploiting this for treatments and for preventive treatments. So we're not there yet, but there's very, very strong evidence for the old friends hypothesis.
But we are getting better at recognising ourselves as the term microbiome, which is very, very new, at recognising ourselves as working in tandem.
Absolutely.
With these bacteria.
We're full of microbes, and they are so important to us in the way of regulating all sorts of things, not just immunity.
We do have to consider those clinically vulnerable populations in society that have a weak immune response to invading pathogens. So children at the age of 5, the immune system is still developing. And then as we get older, the immune system doesn't work quite as efficiently as when it was younger. We can have certain illnesses which can have an impact on the immune response, or also medications. So chemotherapy treatment, for example, that can have an impact on the immune system, or taking certain types of drugs.
Honest, there's so many factors to be taken into account. I'm going to cut through to break because there's 3 of you, and I want a very simple vote on this. You're on your own. You're in your kitchen. You're hungry. You're very hungry. Actually, let's make it you're very hungry. Okay, you've one piece of bread because you didn't buy new bread. You've buttered the piece of bread. It falls onto the floor. No one is there. No one will judge you.
But you have walked on the floor in your shoes.
Yes, you have. It's a normal floor that you've been and the piece has fallen, like whatever. Just, I'll start with you, Ellen. It's simple, yes or no. Would you eat the piece of toast?
Oh, has it landed better side down?
It's 60% of the time it does. You're going to have to take the alternative. It is, yeah.
I think if it was better side up, I probably would.
Okay, only butter side up. Don, are you eating the piece of toast?
Butter side up, butter side down. I'm going to live life on the edge.
Okay. And finally, Sally, are you eating the piece of toast?
Yeah, because I think you have to learn to live with risk. And for me, that's such a small risk. I'd go for it.
Well, you're all filthy, the lot of you.
Oh, I wouldn't go near myself. I don't know how you can live like this. In a sty.
Disgusting hygiene researchers.
I'm so delighted that we had 3 hygiene researchers, all who went, how hungry am I? Yeah, I need the toast. I'd go for it.
And here's the thing: if the bread fell in a pile of my dog's poo, I would not eat it.
Okay, all right. Let's not change it. I would instead of that bizarre hypothetical. It's grand. Just on the floor.
Good to know where your limit is there.
Yes. Yeah. It's good to know you have limits.
You were going to ask us about eating soup off the carpet, Dara, so I'm glad it was toast.
We'll take that as a line in the sand. Thank you to all of our guests, Professor Don Schaffner, Professor Sally Bloomfield and Dr. Ellen Evans.
Well, there you go, Quinn. I think we've answered your question.
Yeah, eat what you want.
There are no rules.
It just seemingly. I mean, it turns out the 5-second rule was if anything too strict.
Just don't lick a chicken, and that's about it.
Don't keep rice in the fridge for too long. But God, yeah, whatever's on the ground, go for it.
And hygiene researchers are absolute filthmongers.
Honestly, I mean, that must be what happens though. You research it and you're kind of going, why have we been worried about this? Turns out it's all fine. Oh, I poured soup on the floor. It doesn't matter. Subscribe to Curious Cases on BBC Sounds and make sure you've got push notifications turned on, and we'll let you know as soon as new episodes are available. You can manage your subscriptions from the My Sounds tab.
From BBC Radio 4 comes Dough, examining the business behind profitable everyday products and what they might be like in the future. I'm the entrepreneur, Sam White. In each episode, I focus on things like TVs, hairdryers or vacuum cleaners, hearing firsthand from people who make them.
We still make products with DVD player built in, and you would be very surprised how many we sell.
Then our expert guests choose their favourite game-changing innovations which shape the products in the past before we follow the money to where they're going next.
Think of the TV 98-inch or 100-inch.
Dough makes the mundane marvellous again. Listen on BBC Sounds.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.